Ladies and gentlemen, please stand for the arrival of the official party and remain standing for the singing of our national anthem by Staff Sergeant Jesse Neese and the invocation, which will be delivered by Chaplain Donald L. Rutherford.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Let us pray. Lord God, we are indeed indebted to the memory of the sky soldiers who sacrificed greatly, some ultimately on the side of an Afghan mountain. Selfless and valiant, their example inspires our service today. I pray that as we enshrine Sergeant Kyle White into our Hall of Heroes, that you would renew our will to pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, and oppose any foe to assure the survival and success of liberty. Grant unto us a higher courage, a purer patriotism, and more determined will to serve our nation and our army more faithfully. This we pray in your holy name. Amen.
Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief of Staff of the Army.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to see everybody here today. It's my distinct privilege for me to be here today as we honor Sergeant Kyle White, who today joins a rare fraternity of military service members who've displayed extraordinary acts of valor during exceptional circumstances with great risk to their own personal safety. Sergeant White embodies the essence of a soldier, represents what every man and woman who dons this uniform strives to be. An individual who has earned all the trust of all with whom he associates, one who possesses humility and selflessness that we all respect, one who embraces esprit de corps and routinely demonstrates a dedication to his profession that epitomizes the ethos of the American soldier. In the face of imminent danger, he never quit. He always put his mission first. He never accepted defeat. And above all else, he never left his fallen comrades. And just as he was there for them that day, his band of brothers are here for him today. But we're also reminded today of the sacrifice that was made on November 9th, 2007, with 6 service members made the ultimate sacrifice. And their presence is felt in all of us as we honor Sergeant White. We remember Captain Matthew Ferrara, Sergeant Philip Box, Sergeant Jeffrey Mearsman, Corporal Leslie G. Roque, Corporal Sean Langevin, and Specialist Joseph Lancourt. And we're honored to have some of their family members with us today. And I'd like to ask them to please stand and be recognized. We're also honored to have with us today Deputy Secretary of Defense Robert Work, Undersecretary of the Army Brad Carson, Sergeant Major of the Army Ray Chandler, and General John Paxton, Assistant Commandant of the Marine Corps, and other leaders of the Department of Defense, the Army, Sergeant Major Battaglia, the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman, and all other leaders here today. We're honored to have you here for this great ceremony. Other distinguished guests, thank you for being here. I'd like to extend a special welcome to Sergeant White's family and friends, his father Kurt, his mother Cheryl, his grandfather Bruce Funk, and his girlfriend Miss Helen Ball. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to recognize Specialist Kane Schilling, who was there that day with Sergeant White. Kane, if you could please stand. I want to welcome all of Sergeant White's former unit members who are with us. Your presence reinforces the personal nature of combat, the strong bonds of friendship formed under extraordinary conditions. I'd like you all to please stand and be recognized as well. Thanks also to the current command teams from the 173rd Airborne Brigade Combat Team, Sky Soldiers, from the 2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry Regiment for being here today. When in combat, you never know what each day might bring. All you know is you must always be mentally and physically prepared. But as we all know, there are certain days that are very different from others. That day for Sergeant White and his platoon was November 9th, 2007. Sergeant White and Specialist Schilling were members of Chosen Company, 2nd Battalion, 503rd Infantry Regiment. They were headquartered with members of their platoon and with soldiers of the Afghan National Army at Combat Outpost Bella. The night prior, 14 Americans, paratroopers from the 2nd and the 503rd, and one Marine, Sergeant Box, and a squad of Afghan National Army soldiers bunked in a schoolhouse in preparation for a Shura meeting with village elders at a nearby mosque. Villagers delayed the meeting for several hours before beginning mid-afternoon at around 13:30. Not long after the meeting began, Sergeant Box let his leadership know that the interpreter was hearing radio chatter in a language he did not understand. This cued the platoon leader, then Lieutenant Ferrara, to direct his element to return to the outpost. During their exfil, the unit was ambushed, coming under fire from a significant number of enemy positions. Sergeant White, along with his platoon, immediately returned fire, emptying their magazines in the direction of enemy targets. He was knocked unconscious, suffering a concussion when an enemy rocket-propelled grenade detonated near him. As he came to, a fragmented round sent shrapnel into his face. Even under such chaotic conditions, Sergeant White gathered himself and assessed the situation, noting that he, Specialist Schilling, Lieutenant Ferrara, and Sergeant Box, and the interpreter were cut off from the rest of their patrol, whose members had been forced down a cliff. He saw that Specialist Schilling had been shot in the arm, so he quickly applied a tourniquet to stop the bleeding, and then found concealment for them underneath a lone tree. In the fury of the attack, Sergeant White took charge. After tending to Specialist Schilling, he noticed that Sergeant Box was badly injured and lying in the open. Under continuous fire, Sergeant White sprinted back and forth 4 times to the Marine, diverting fire from him while moving him to a more protected location. Sergeant White then applied a tourniquet to Sergeant Box's leg, but unfortunately he succumbed to his wounds. Returning to Specialist Schilling, Sergeant White saw that he had been hit again, this time in the leg. Sergeant White pulled off the belt from his own pants to form a tourniquet, tying it around Specialist Schilling's leg to stop the bleeding. Sergeant White next saw his platoon leader, Lieutenant Matthew Ferrara, laying still, face down. He again exposed himself to fire, crawling to Lieutenant Ferrara, who had perished from his wounds. Sergeant White then crawled back under fire to Specialist Schilling. Sergeant White realized that he needed to communicate with friendly elements, but both his and Specialist Schilling's radios had been damaged, with Specialist Schilling's hand mic getting blown out of Sergeant White's hand by an enemy round. Once again, he subjected himself to hostile fire, this time to get Sergeant Box's radio. Sergeant White was then able to relay key information, enabling his company and battalion to bring in mortars, artillery, airstrikes, and helicopter gunships, which prevented the enemy from massing unfriendly positions. Sergeant White also directed the interpreter to relay commands to the ANA, and he set them into a security perimeter. The fight continued, with Sergeant White suffering another concussion as a friendly mortar round exploded near him. Reeling from multiple head injuries, he willed himself to stay awake, calling in a medevac to evacuate both Specialist Schilling and injured ANA soldiers. Sergeant White marked the landing zone and assisted the medic in hoisting up the wounded soldiers, refusing to be evacuated until all of the wounded were out of the ambush site. Today, as we induct Sergeant White into the famed Hall of Heroes, he joins the rare fraternity of military service members in the Medal of Honor Society. All of them have demonstrated uncommon valor and extraordinary courage under fire. Sergeant White's humility, honor, leadership, integrity, personal courage, and selfless service represent what is best about our soldiers and our Army. Sergeant White's concern for his fellow soldiers, his conspicuous gallantry, and his intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty make him a national hero with a lasting legacy. Today we honor Sergeant White, a man of conviction. And by honoring him, we honor those heroes who fought so selflessly by his side, and all of our soldiers who have raised their right hand to defend this country and defend our ideals. The bonds formed in combat between brothers and sisters are everlasting and difficult to describe to someone else who has never experienced it. But it is the inspiration that drives ordinary soldiers to be extraordinary. Today, we recognize an extraordinary soldier, Sergeant Kyle White. The strength of our nation is our Army. The strength of our Army is our soldiers. The strength of our soldiers is our families, and that's what makes us Army strong. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Undersecretary of the Army.
Families of the fallen, Deputy Secretary of Defense, Mr. Work, the Army Chief of Staff, General Odierno, Deputy Undersecretary of Defense, Mr. McCord, other distinguished visitors, General Paxton, the members of chosen company, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We are here today to induct Sergeant White into the Hall of Heroes. Now, that word induction means the installation of someone into a position of responsibility. But it also means something else. It means to introduce new ideas, new knowledge, new beliefs. And so we are here as an institution, as an Army, as the Defense Department, perhaps to learn from Sergeant White and also from his predecessors, the Medal of Honor recipients past, whose names we also honor today, if only in silence. So what do we learn from Sergeant White? One only has to look out into the audience to see the obvious answer, as the chief pointed out, because of Sergeant White's decision to remain with the wounded, to never accept defeat, to never quit, to never leave a fallen comrade. Mr. Kane Schilling, who stood a moment ago, lives today. But Sergeant White's fortitude under fire teaches us many other things, things more intangible perhaps, but that speak directly to our Army's institutional values. For in his life, in his heroic example, he teaches us what soldiers mean when they do raise that right hand and when they recite the creed. For much of what soldiers profess, selfless service, honor, loyalty, duty, Sergeant White made manifest during the Battle of 9 November, and during some of the most trying circumstances that fate could see fit to contrive. This is also not to mention that on that day, he performed an exquisite exhibition of soldierly skills, stabilizing injured soldiers, reestablishing communication, and rising to the challenge of suddenly taking charge in a terrifying situation. And while we know, at least in part, where Sergeant White's soldierly skills came from, we must ask the more interesting question: from where did Sergeant White learn these values? And what brings our soldiers, all of them, whether their names are inscribed on the Hall of Heroes or whether their names are instead largely forgotten to history, what brings them all to perform so valiantly? Since the 6 survivors of the Mitchell raid were awarded the first medals of honor in 1863, citizens, from presidents to privates, have received the medal. The stories of the medal's recipients come from every imaginable background and from every station that this great land maintains. I think when I'm in the Hall of Heroes and I see that long list of names, that rare fraternity that the chief alluded to, I think of Sergeant Desmond Dross, who was drafted in World War II, but he was drawn by a religious conviction. He was a Seventh-day Adventist to petition as a conscientious objector. But he still wanted to serve, and he did serve. As a medic, he exposed himself repeatedly to enemy fire in order to carry back the wounded over the Urasomura escarpment of Okinawa. When he himself was wounded, grievously wounded, he threw himself from the litter that was carrying him off the battlefield so that a soldier with still greater wounds might be removed from peril. And I think of another soldier, this one from World War I, whose battlefield prowess we remember still today, that would do single-handedly led to the surrender of an entrenched machine gun nest and the capture of 132 enemy soldiers. His name, Sergeant Alvin York. Or the history of Vernon Baker, an African-American who trained in Army camps during World War II in the stifling racism of the South, rose above all of that to earn the nation's highest honor, leading his men outnumbered and outgunned in the rugged hills of Italy. Or perhaps another name on that wall, Sadao Munamori, a Japanese-American. He was awarded the medal posthumously after diving onto a grenade to save the lives of his fellow soldiers in that same series of actions that Vernon Baker was recognized for. Sadao's parents received notice of his death while they were living in the same internment camp from which he had volunteered for duty in the United States Army. So why? Why, to use a phrase of Oliver Wendell Holmes, offered in remembrance of the Civil War heroes that he had personally known, why were all of these hearts so touched by fire? And where do we find such people? Perhaps it is President Reagan who said it best when he noted in his radio address on Armed Forces Day in 1982, when asked that very question, he replied, "We find them where we have always found them. They are the product of the freest society man has ever known. They make a commitment to the military, make it freely, because the birthright we share as Americans is worth defending." I believe that President Reagan is correct, but I also believe that we can look a bit more close to home for some of Sergeant White's values and the sources of his character. In the audience here on the front row, we have Sergeant White's father, Mr. Kurt White, who perhaps taught him a little of that humility which Sergeant White is already so famous for. Mr. White, if you would stand, please. We talked a little bit earlier. And 8 years in the United States Army from 1972 to 1980, and now 31 years at the Boeing Corporation. Please join me in congratulating. Thank you. Like all veterans, we owe you as a country an inestimable debt. And Mrs. White, Cheryl White, Sergeant White's mother, if you might stand as well and be recognized. You know, it is a truism, it's a bromide that one's character shapes one's fate, and that is no doubt quite right, that character does shape fate. But I would say that one's mother shapes one's character. Please give a round of applause to Mrs. White. So Kurt, Cheryl, congratulations and job well done. And I do wish to convey gratitude not just to you and your son, but to all the members of Chosen Company for the service and sacrifice of them all. Your work, their work, inspires us. And for those of Chosen Company who made the ultimate sacrifice, the names that the Chief has already read, but worth repeating again, Captain Ferrara, Sergeant Mersman, Corporal Roquet, Corporal Langevin, Specialist Lancourt, and from the Marine Corps, Sergeant Box. President Lincoln's words serve best. There is little that we can do to commemorate their sacrifice, but rather, as he said, it is for us, the living, to be dedicated here to their unfinished work that still lies ahead. And the work of the Army continues to empower our soldiers abroad, to care for with dignity those soldiers wounded, to honor our obligations to the soldiers whose service is now honorably completed, to remember those soldiers who paid the ultimate sacrifice, and to ready our future soldiers for when the nation calls again, for the nation will call again. Shaped by our nation's values and forged by the values of the Army, so present today, we will be ready. So may God bless you. May God bless Sergeant White and his family. May God bless all of those who choose a life of service to this country and who, in the poet's words, have left the vivid air signed with their honor. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Deputy Secretary of Defense.
Well, to the family and friends, acquaintances, and comrades in arms of Sergeant Kyle White, good morning on this absolutely splendid day in May. It is a singular honor for me to represent Secretary Hagel, who, as a former Army sergeant, he would be right here if he was in the country, but he is out of the country today and has asked me to represent him, and I do so with great honor. And joining the Chief, Undersecretary Carson, Sergeant Major Chandler, General Paxton, veterans and current members of our armed forces, the soldiers of Chosen Company, and all those who know Sergeant White as we gather here today to honor his extraordinary heroism. Now, quite frankly, there's little more that I can add to the stirring account that General Odierno gave of the Battle of 9 November 2007 and the selfless and heroic actions that Sergeant White performed that day, for which he was awarded our nation's highest award for bravery, the Medal of Honor. Nor can I approve on the heartfelt explanation of Undersecretary Carson, who explained how Sergeant White embodies the very best of what makes all soldiers, as well as Marines, sailors, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen, so singularly special and part of the greatest armed forces that this world has ever seen. So as I prepared for this speech, I asked myself, what might I add to this August gathering? And I decided to just pull on a little bit of the string that both the Chief and the Undersecretary talked about. The unbelievably small and extraordinary brotherhood that Sergeant White has entered, and what it means to all of us who have served our nation. Now, Secretary Carson mentioned the first Medal of Honor was awarded in 1863 in the midst of one of the greatest catastrophes our nation has ever had, our Civil War. And perhaps fittingly, for the audience today, it was awarded to another soldier, the first one, Private Jacob Parrott, Company K, 33 Ohio Infantry, one of 6 survivors of the daring raid that the Undersecretary talked about, sent 200 miles behind enemy lines to disrupt Confederate railroad traffic. Now, since then, 40 million Americans, men and women, have either volunteered or been drafted and served in times of war, spanning from 1863 and the remainder of that bloody Civil War to the Plains Wars, to the Spanish-American War, to World War I, World War II, Vietnam, the first Persian Gulf War, Iraq and Afghanistan, and in countless small, bloody wars and battles around the globe. Of those 40 million servicemen and women, only 3,488, counting Sergeant White, have been awarded the Medal of Honor. Now, I want you to think about that for just 1 second. Since 1863, we have awarded this medal less than 3,500 times, reserved for a very, very select few who have responded above and beyond the call of duty, as outlined so eloquently by General Odierno, and risked their lives in selfless acts of bravery. In all of World War II, only 464 medals were awarded. In Korea, 133. In Vietnam, 246. And of the 2.5 million American service members who have deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq since the terrible attacks of September 11th, 2001, Sergeant White is the 14th recipient of this honor. That is why, by custom, every service member, regardless of rank, regardless of station, stands and salutes anyone who wears the pale blue medal adorned with stars around their necks. It is also why we consider the Hall of Heroes such a hallowed and storied place, because it represents the highest soldierly virtues of literally millions of men and women who have risked their own lives and often given them for their country and their brothers and sisters in arms in battle. Sergeant Kyle, as the President of the United States said yesterday, and as recounted by General Odierno today, your inspiring actions in that narrow pass in Afghanistan, in that cold day in November, have proven yourself worthy to be a member of this select group. Secretary Hagel and I, and everyone in the department, regardless of whether they're a soldier, couldn't be prouder for you or your unit and your Army. So this is a little unscripted, but I'd ask Sergeant White for you to stand and face the crowd. And I'd ask that everyone who has served in uniform, and is either in uniform or not, to stand with me and salute this American hero today. Hand salute. Ready, 2. And finally, they've been recognized here today several times. And I think by his very actions that day in November, as well as the medal bracelet that Sergeant White wears around his wrists every day, I think I can confidently speak for him and to ask that we all pause once again and offer a moment of silence or prayers for the comrades that Sergeant White lost on that fateful day on 9 November. Captain Ferrara, United States Army. Sergeant Mersman, United States Army. Corporal Langevin, United States Army. Corporal Roque, United States Army. Specialist Lancourt, United States Army. And Sergeant Box, United States Marine Corps. Sergeant White, these fine young men, your fellow warriors, your brothers in arms, although no longer of this earth, are going to be with you forever. I'm sure they're toasting you now, applauding your life that you have lived since their deaths, and cheering your future accomplishments. After all, the very purpose of this award is to celebrate in both gratitude and remembrance. So Kyle, let this award mark not only your bravery, but the bravery and memory of your fallen brothers in arms. And I hope that all Americans come to know your service, to know the exceptional courage you displayed on behalf of your fellow soldiers and Marines, and to witness the example you've set as one who's answered the call to service, completed your mission, transitioned to civilian life with grace, purpose, and honor. Your story represents the very, very best of the American fighting men and women and preserves the memory of your comrades. May your medal remind you of the tremendous good your service has brought this far and of the limitless things that Secretary Hagel and I know that it will bring in the future. On behalf of Secretary Hagel, thank you, Kyle. May God bless you and your family and all those like you in the greatest army on the planet who have volunteered to serve and fight our nation's foes wherever they may be found. Thank you all, and God bless you.
General Odierno, Undersecretary Carson, Sergeant Major of the Army Chandler, and Sergeant White will now join Secretary Work on stage for the induction ceremony. The President of the United States of America, authorized by Act of Congress, has awarded in the name of Congress the Medal of Honor to Specialist Kyle J. White, who distinguished himself by acts of gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty, while serving as a radio telephone operator with Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion Airborne, 503rd Infantry Regiment, 173rd Airborne Brigade, during combat operations against an armed enemy in Nuristan Province, Afghanistan, on November 9, 2007. On that day, Specialist White and his comrades were returning to Bella Outpost from Ashura with Aranas village leaders. As the soldiers traversed a narrow path surrounded by mountainous, rocky terrain, they were ambushed by enemy forces from elevated positions. Pinned against a steep mountain face, Specialist White and his fellow soldiers were completely exposed to enemy fire. Specialist White returned fire and was briefly knocked unconscious when a rocket-propelled grenade impacted near him. When he regained consciousness, another round impacted near him, embedding small pieces of shrapnel in his face. Shaking off his wounds, Specialist White noticed one of his comrades lying wounded nearby. Without hesitation, Specialist White exposed himself to enemy fire in order to reach the soldier and provide medical aid. After applying a tourniquet, Specialist White moved to an injured Marine, similarly providing aid and comfort until the Marine succumbed to his wounds. Specialist White then returned to the soldier and discovered that he had been wounded again. Applying his own belt as an additional tourniquet, Specialist White was able to stem the flow of blood and save the soldier's life. Noticing that his and the other soldiers' radios were inoperative, Specialist White exposed himself to enemy fire yet again in order to secure a radio from a deceased comrade. He then provided information and updates to friendly forces, allowing precision airstrikes to stifle the enemy's attack and ultimately permitting medical evacuation aircraft to rescue him, his fellow soldiers, Marines, and Afghan Army soldiers. Specialist Kyle J. White's extraordinary heroism and selflessness above and beyond the call of duty are in keeping with the highest traditions of military service and reflect great credit upon himself, Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion Airborne, 503rd Infantry Regiment, 173rd Airborne Brigade, and the United States Army. The War on Terrorism plaque will now be unveiled, inducting Sergeant White into the Hall of Heroes. At this time, the Deputy Secretary of Defense will present the Medal of Honor flag. On 23 October 2002, Public Law 107-248, Section 8143, established the Medal of Honor flag to recognize service members who have distinguished themselves by gallantry in action above and beyond the call of duty. The Medal of Honor flag commemorates the sacrifice and bloodshed for our freedoms and gives emphasis to the Medal of Honor being the highest award for valor by an individual serving in the armed forces of the United States. The light blue color with gold fringe bearing 13 white stars are adapted from the Medal of Honor ribbon. Thank you, Deputy Secretary Work, General Odierno, Undersecretary Carson, and Sergeant Major Chandler. Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Kyle White.
Deputy Secretary Work, General Odierno, Undersecretary Carson, Sergeant Major of the Army Chandler, General and Flag Officers, brother and sisters in arms, Gold Star families, my family, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. So I've had nightmares before, but never have I had two at the same time. And I'm living both of them right now. One is having the entire Army senior leadership watching every single thing I do, and second one is speaking in front of a large group of people. No offense, it's just last time I saw this much stuff, I was usually in trouble for something. But I do have nightmares about 9 November, though. Fewer and fewer as the days go on. But sometimes I can be right back there, smelling the gunpowder and burning hot metal of enemy grenades, tasting the air after my radio was hit. I can close my eyes and feel the whiz of the bullets as they pierce my uniform, missing my skin but annoying the hell out of me, like mosquitoes at a barbecue. As I tried to get Sergeant Box out of danger, I can still see the puff of air jostle Kane Schilling's uniform pant leg before the pool of blood began to soak through it from the enemy round. It was the worst day of my life. That day, those smells, those sights changed my life. But at least I have a life. I was given a gift on 9 November. A gift that 6 of my brothers did not get. I get to go on. I get to be better than I was at the age of 20, just a knuckle-headed boy from Seattle who wanted to jump out of airplanes. In my eyes, those 6 men, whose names I want everyone in the world to know, they can never be any more perfect than they were that day. On that goat trail, on a mountainside in Afghanistan, fighting for their brothers. They were warriors. They were the best of us. I knew some better than others. My one regret is that I didn't take enough opportunities to get to know them all. In fact, I barely knew Sergeant Jeffrey Mersman, who served 4 tours in Iraq before his final deployment as my teammate. I have since learned he loved to hunt and go mudding. And I only met Marine Sergeant Philip Box 5 days before the ambush. He was an expert at teaching others how to survive in mountainous terrain. He was a professional, tough. Though he knew he was dying, he never once gave an air of fear. He was amazing. I remember before deployment back in Italy, I go to Lancor's barracks room to hang out. His roommate's side, one side was all squared away, everything is the way it's supposed to be. On the other side, it looked like a bomb went off. Back in his hometown, when our unit was attacked at Ranch House, a few months before 9 November ambush, he cared about us so much that it's all he could think about. While he was at home safe, it was getting back to us is what he wanted. He wanted to be there to protect us, no matter what. Corporal Lester was the most amazing medic. He was a quiet professional. I remember, well, one of the things I remember most about him is he always had these noodle bowls that his family would send him, and I used to just hound him on the daily just for one of those, because they were delicious. Captain Matthew Ferrara, I was his RTO, so we were pretty close. He was always a very by-the-book officer, but every once in a while he'd break protocol and just be one of the boys. Like the time when he acquired a projector from Supply and a sheet as well, and he hung it on the wall so we could have a massive Xbox tournament. That was probably the best few days of the deployment. I'm sure others didn't feel the same, as he tended to cheat and beat us all, but that's okay. But it was funny because we were real soldiers fighting in a war, but we were more into a video game about war. And I saved the best for last, my friend Sean Langevin. People were just drawn to him. He was so funny and so mischievous. I knew full well that hanging around with him would land me in some kind of trouble. But I didn't care. I just wanted to be around him. He brought fun wherever he went. It was one day on guard shift, not too long before 9 November, that we got to talking about what if. We both promised to take care of each other's families if something happened. It wasn't too long after that random discussion that my promise was tested. These 6 men were Sky soldiers who gave their all to protect each other. They were a special few of America's young men who braved death and danger in search of something greater than themselves as part of the nation's military. They are part of the 9/11 generation, 9/11, a date that changed the lives of, I dare say, everyone in this room. So it is fate that these 6 would give their lives on a different 9/11, 9 November. They were just boys when this very building was rocked by Flight 77 and the Twin Towers came crashing down in a city I will visit next week. They were teenagers with acne and girl problems when the country was torn by terrorism on that terrible day in November, 9/11. But these boys from places like Troy, Michigan and Walnut Creek, California, grew up quickly and volunteered to devote their lives to help prevent that nightmare from ever occurring on this soil again. We owe young men like them so much gratitude. They knowingly left their future to chance indifference to a greater calling. While my name hangs in the Hall of Heroes, the names of these 6 men will hang in my heart and, of course, on my wrist forever. Box, Ferrara, Langcor, Langevin, Mersman, and Roque. Members of the 9/11 generation, lost on 9/11/2007, but never forgotten. They gave so others could live. What better honor could I pay them than to live each day to the fullest and be the best that I can be? Everything I do is done to make them proud. Everything I am is because they are no longer here. Their loss has taught me to allow for no regret. Seize the moments you are given and be better than you were the day before. I know that's what they would do. I hope, beyond hope, that I can one day be worthy of their sacrifice. These are my brothers, and they are more than soldiers for life. They are sky soldiers for life. Let us not forget that these are 6 of 2,221 service members who have died serving as part of Operation Enduring Freedom, a war instigated by the attacks on 9/11/2001. And my name is just one of 3,488 names etched in the Hall of Heroes. The story of Chosen Company is just one of the countless stories of bravery and sacrifice that have happened and are still happening in the service of our nation. This is just one story. There are others. I urge you each to learn the names that match these numbers so their sacrifices can never be forgotten. Thank you for sharing this special day with my family, my team members, and myself.
Thank you, Sergeant White. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing and join in the singing of the Army Song. The words to the Army Song can be found in your program.
March along, sing our song with the army of the free. Count the brave, count the true, who have fought to victory. We're the army and proud of our name. We're the army and proudly proclaim. First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. Then it's hi, hi, hey, the army's on its way. Count off the cadence loud and strong. For where we go, you will always know that the army goes rolling along.